And I'm Mike, Regala Photography, where we talk about everything photography. Today we're going to talk about the exposure triangle in photography. The exposure triangle is a concept that is essential for photographers to understand if they want to have full control of their images. The exposure triangle refers to the three main factors that determine the exposure of a photograph: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Exposure refers to the amount of light that is allowed to reach the camera's sensor or film when the photograph is taken. If the exposure is too high, the photograph will be overexposed and will appear too bright. If the exposure is too low, the photograph will be underexposed and will appear too dark. The aperture is the opening of the lens that controls the amount of light that enters the camera. Aperture is measured in f-stops, and a smaller f-stop number indicates a larger aperture opening, and a larger f-stop number is a smaller opening. A larger aperture opening allows more light to enter the camera, which can be useful in low light situations. However, it also results in a shallower depth of field, which can be used to create artistic blur in the background of a photograph. Smaller aperture lets less light in, which results in more of the image being sharper. The shutter speed refers to the amount of time that the camera's shutter remains open when the photograph is taken. Shutter speed is measured in seconds or fractions of a second. A faster shutter speed allows less light to enter the camera, which can be useful for freezing fast motion or fast moving subjects, or reducing motion blur. Slower shutter speeds are great for long exposures, like blurring the water movement of a waterfall. ISO refers to the sensitivity of the camera's sensor to light. A higher ISO value allows the camera to capture more light, but it also introduces more grain or noise into the photograph. It's important to find the right balance between ISO, aperture, or shutter speed to achieve the desired exposure. Now that you understand the three elements of the exposure triangle, let's discuss how to use them together to create a properly exposed image. The key is to balance these three elements to achieve the desired exposure while maintaining the desired depth of field and motion blur. Here is an example. Suppose you are shooting a portrait in low light conditions. To get a shallow depth of field, you want to use a wide aperture, which is a low f-stop number, say 1.8. However, since it is low light, you will need a slower shutter speed to let more light in. Let's just say 1/60th of a second. Now, since your shutter speed is slower, you might also need to increase or decrease your ISO to maintain a proper exposure. Let's just say 400 to 800. Therefore, in this scenario, you would use an aperture of 1.8, a shutter speed of 1/60th of a second, and an ISO of 400 to get a properly exposed portrait with a shallow depth of field. Understanding the exposure triangle is crucial for any photographer, and it takes practice to get it right. Remember the three elements of the exposure triangle: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. They all work together to create a properly exposed image. So experiment with different settings and see how they affect your image. Please subscribe to my channel. Click that like button. It really does help me in my algorithm with YouTube. Ring that bell if you want to be notified when my next video is posted. Until next time, take care, everybody.